Hello everyone, I have the Kindle and the iPad for reading books, but it's the Kindle Paperwhite over here that's helped me read more books in the last month than I've done in the past year. That's a big win because reading is possibly the highest ROI investment I can make in myself. So in today's video, I'm going to give you 6 reasons why I think that the Kindle is a better buy than the iPad if you're trying to make reading a habit. I'm going to give you an upfront conclusion and it's 3 points. So if you don't make it to the end of this video, hear these 3 points out. The Kindle is designed for only one purpose, and that is to read. The entire design is oriented around having a reading experience that's as seamless and immersive as possible. On the other hand, the iPad is designed to let you consume all kinds of different content where reading is just one of the things it can do. That doesn't mean it's bad for reading, I just find the Kindle to be a much more refined experience overall. On a side note, if you can afford to buy both the Kindle and the iPad, I would recommend it. I use the Kindle to read and I use the iPad for content creation, such as for sketching notes or typing an email or an essay or brainstorming a business idea. They are both incredibly useful to me, but for different purposes. With that being said, let's start comparing the iPad to the Kindle for new readers, specifically readers who are looking to build a habit. Let's begin with the screen comparison. So what I have in front of me here is the iPad Pro. Like all the other iPads, it has a very bright, colorful and glossy display. The Kindle, on the other hand, has a monochrome matte effect. I think they call the display an e-ink display. No matter what angle of the light you shine it at, it doesn't reflect light in the same way as it does with the iPad. Both of them have a setting for adjustable warm light for reading in the evening time or nighttime. The Kindle is actually closer to reading a book, and in my opinion, it's more pleasurable to use than the iPad. Because it's more pleasurable to use, I'm way more likely to stick to the habit of reading with the Kindle than I am with the iPad. You know, the iPad is going to be used for other things like Netflix and videos and drawings and all that kind of stuff. But for the use case of reading, the Kindle wins out in my opinion. Another important difference to look at is weight in the hand. The iPad can become fatiguing to use because it's heavier than the Kindle. This matters a lot when you're reading in bed and you're propping up the iPad with one hand. The iPad mini might be easier, but the weight of the iPad is much heavier than the Kindle. You will still get the fatigue in the same way. Another thing I notice is that after I finish reading a book at nighttime, I will go to put my Kindle on the bedside table, and I don't need to worry about dinking or dropping it in the same way as I do with the iPad. Because the iPad is made from aluminium and it's a very expensive glass device, when you're like on the cusp of sleep and you want to put your iPad down before you like roll over and eventually like drift off, I'm always like a little bit more alert to the fact that I have an iPad in my hand and it's a little bit more delicate and I've got to be a bit more cautious. Whereas with the Kindle, I don't really have that problem. In fact, I don't even need to put it on my bedside table. I can kind of just like slide it under the pillow and just go to sleep. In my day-to-day life, the added weight of the iPad means I have to think twice about throwing it in my backpack and taking it with me when I go out. Especially if I'm already taking a laptop, it makes me think twice. Do I need to bring the iPad with me? I might want to read on the tube or the train, but a laptop and a tablet can get quite heavy in a bag, especially if you have other things with you. On the other hand, with the Kindle, it is super lightweight. I don't really have to think twice before throwing it into my backpack. I can actually fit it into my jacket pocket. I don't even need to take it in the backpack at all. I'm also more likely to read because I will see the Kindle in my bag, or I'll be sitting on the bus or the train and I'll think to myself, well, I've got my Kindle with me. I can read a couple of pages before I get to my destination. As you can tell, physically speaking, I'm a bigger fan of the Kindle for reading than I am the iPad. Just as a little side note, the Kindle has actually challenged this previously held belief I had that it was technologically inferior to the iPad. I don't mind admitting that I love Apple products, but when it comes to reading, it's not always the case. Where things start to get interesting is what I call finding flow. Finding flow is the ability to pick up a book and get completely absorbed in the story. It's when you stop checking the time or how many pages are left in the chapter and you just keep swiping page after page after page. I've found that this is hard to achieve with the iPad. That's because it's extremely distracting to have lots of notifications coming through my iPad and lots of tempting apps on my home screen. Even with Do Not Disturb turned on, I'm only a swipe away from being distracted and taken out of my flow state. In the context of building a reading habit, the iPad is a mental cue for more than just reading, it's a cue for other things. As a result, when I pick up my iPad, I am far less likely to use that for reading than I am for other things. In the last month that I've been using this Paperwhite, I have found flow in the books that I'm reading a couple of times already, even on public transport when I'm not in a comfortable environment at home. It's an excellent and inexpensive way to build a reading habit because it's a device that's built to only do one thing. There are no distractions, there are no other apps. I mentally associate my Kindle with reading. When I see it, I only think one thing. Sometimes I will see my Kindle like chilling on my desk, and if you press the lock screen over here, you will see that it gives you a book recommendation. It's actually an advert, but it's a tailored advert based on my reading list. This is good for 2 reasons. The first reason is that I get lots of book suggestions And the second reason is that having this book suggestion like plants the seed in my mind that this Kindle exists and there's lots of books on there, and you know, if I feel like it, I can just pick it up and start reading. I'm just more likely to pick it up and start reading when I see these things, especially because it's just so easy. I just press a button, swipe up, and I'm right back where I left off. Next up, we're going to talk about the battery life. The iPad Pro has a 10-hour battery life, and the Kindle Paperwhite over here has a 28-hour battery life. Both devices charge via USB-C, and that means you don't have to carry around a dedicated cable. Most people already have a USB-C for their laptops or maybe for their mobile phones, so it's nice to know you've got one cable that can do it all. There's nothing worse than reaching to pick up your e-reader and find that it's out of juice and you can't read because you've set this time aside to sit down and read. It's for that reason that the Kindle wins out again. There is another element to this that I want to talk about. In my experience, the iPad battery drains very quickly when it's in standby, whereas the Kindle can be left for days at a time in standby mode. A cool feature you get on the Kindle that you don't get on the iPad is vocabulary builder. The way it works is that the Kindle will track which words you are looking up the definition for. You can see a list of all of the words that you looked up the definition for. That is really cool. I am seriously surprised that Apple haven't introduced that feature on Apple Books. Maybe it's not fair to compare the price of these two devices because the iPad is a very premium tablet designed to do more than just reading. However, I really want to highlight how accessible the Kindle is and how much value I've derived from it. The cheapest baseline iPad right now is the iPad mini, and in the UK that retails for £479. The cheapest Kindle, on the other hand, is selling for £80, or if you want to go for the Kindle Paperwhite, that's £129. If you've never owned a Kindle before, I really hope you consider trying one out. I'm also going to be sharing my book learnings amongst other things in a newsletter. If you would like to receive an occasional email from me with those things, then I'm going to leave a link to that down below.